Hi, everyone. I'm still reeling from that performance that just happened. It was truly beautiful. But moving on to another anticipated presentation of the morning, I would like to present David Goodman here with me today. Yes. David is the CEO of Humanity Pictures and studied acting at Freedom Theater in Philadelphia. In 1994, he joined the Screen Actors Guild and has been performing since. He's appeared in countless films, local and national commercials, and numerous TV shows on platforms like NBC and HBO. It's my absolute honor to speak with David with me today and talk about his journey and work.
Oh, thank you so much. It's great to be here. Thank you.
Okay, let's just get right into it. So, can you please share a little bit about how you kind of started on your journey and when did you realize you wanted to become a performing artist?
Sure. I was actually born in Jersey City, so I've got roots up in North Jersey as well as down here. And I was born in Jersey City, but I was raised in Queens. I lived in Queens, New York at the time that, I was born. My mom was just really challenged, had a very challenged life. And as a result, my grandparents felt it was best for my sister and I to be, raised by a caretaker in Queens, New York. So I went to elementary school in Queens, and then on the weekends I was at my grandparents' house. And that went on for about 10 years. But in 1974, my mom, she started practicing Buddhism. And she was able to transform her life so much so that, and that's a story in and of itself, her life. But she transformed her life so much so that we were able to move in with her in 76 here in Camden, New Jersey. And it was difficult. I mean, I struggled as a teen. I struggled with who I was, struggled with my self-esteem. I was bullied in school. Didn't like myself that much. But I found the arts. I have to give credit to a couple of teachers at Hatch Middle School, Yvonne Kersey, who's passed, but she was the choir director, and Ben White, who had a dance, led the dance group in the school. They brought me into the arts, and that really did a lot for me. And it was in 1977, actually, when you talk about how did I find my dream. In 1977, I'll never forget, Freedom Theater came and did a Black History performance at the school. And I remember sitting in the audience watching this performance and thinking to myself, wow, they look so free. They look so happy, on stage. And at that moment, I said, that's what I want to be. I want to be a performer. And since then, it's been this pursuit of, living a life as a performer.
Wow, sixth grade. Like I didn't realize how far back Camden was tied to, your roots. But why did you kind of decide to continue to stay in Camden?
I decided to stay here. It actually after high school, my mom had gotten married, and she was married for a couple of years. But it was the summer after I graduated. My stepfather then left. I'll never forget the day when I came down, and he just said, he was done, and he left. I was really, really angry about that. Really struggled with that. But at the same time, he was the breadwinner of the family, so I went into the workforce, to really help support the family. And I had a, myriad of jobs. I worked at, I'll never forget this gas station on Amerson Boulevard, Amoco gas station. And I worked the night shift, and man, that was a crazy shift on Amerson Boulevard. But I used to walk to work there. I worked at a Wendy's for their overnight shift to work Chi-Chi's Mexican. Anything I could do just to make some money. So I did that, and actually eventually wound up in telemarketing, which turned out to be pretty good because I learned a lot about business in telemarketing. But I worked in telemarketing for about 6 years. But even all during that time, I had this dream of being an actor, and I never lost sight of that dream. And whenever possible to do something in theater, I did it.
Yeah, I mean, you really had a journey, and it's inspiring to see how you overcame that and so gracefully at that. Since you're here with us today as a successful videographer. You mentioned that your dream got deferred, but you never lost sight of it. How did you and kind of when did you decide to kind of come back into that dream?
I tell you, there's nothing better than having a great life partner.
Oh,
I'm stand here today on the support of so many people, particularly my wife. I got married in 1994, and I was still working in telemarketing, and I wasn't happy doing that kind of work. It just wasn't. It wasn't it was lucrative. It helped me. We was making some money. It offered me a decent lifestyle, And actually, it was a pathway to meeting my wife as well. And that's, like I said, a story in and of itself. But I wasn't happy doing the job. And my wife, she said to me, she said, I always had this dream of being a teacher. And there's three things that I wanted to do. I wanted to be an actor, a DJ, and a teacher, Um, so she knew what my dream was. And she said, look, you're not happy doing this. We can afford for you to go to school for a couple of years, get a degree, and teach. So I said, okay. So I left my job and went to school. And it was while I was in school, my wife, she encouraged. She said, you have this look. You should do TV, film. I was doing theater at the time, but she said you should do theater, and I was like, I'm not really sure. She's like, you should give it a shot. So I got some headshots taken, sent them out, and immediately I started getting phone calls about agents wanting to represent me. And I'll never forget my first agent, Greer Lang, out in Malvern, PA. We went in, we sat down, and I think it was that day they sent me out on an audition, and I booked the job. And it just kept going from there. I just kept booking more and more jobs, and it started to conflict with my school. And it was actually, again, my wife who reminded me that she said, you've always had this dream of being an actor. The work is here. What do you want to do? So I decided that, I'm going to make the jump. And I stayed with acting.
Wow, that's really amazing. Now I'm kind of interested to know, because you've had such a successful acting career. I've seen the long list of performances in your bio, but you're here with us today as a videographer. So yeah, I know your work as a videographer has truly changed so many lives and so many people's perspectives, which is the core of what you do. At that time, you were only an actor. So why did you decide to kind of move from being in front of the camera to now being behind the camera?
Being on set, I've always had an interest in technology and the technology of Hollywood, just movie making. And I can remember looking at the camera, hearing them talk, and always wondering, like, wow, what are they talking about? One of the things I also do, I work with a nonprofit here in the city called IDEA, the Institute for the Development of Education in the Arts. And we offer arts programming to kids. So and Cynthia Primus is the CEO of the company, and she's also like a sister to me. I've known Cynthia for almost 40 years. So we were gifted a camera and a computer, and we needed to start to videotape what we were doing. So we didn't have anybody, so I just picked it up and started to do it. And I found that I enjoyed it, especially editing. I loved being able to tell stories through editing. So that's what I did. And I got to a point in 2007, I actually got the name of my company in 2007, Humanity Pictures, telling life stories. But I didn't do anything with it. I did some work here and there, but I didn't really do anything with it. But it wasn't until 2020, the killing of George Floyd, that really did something to me. Just that summertime, I was angry, just like so many other folks. I wanted to break some stuff too, But I knew that wouldn't create any value. So I really started to think and pray, like, what could I do that could, create value? And I decided that I am going to start up my production company, and I wanted to create content that could really get people to think differently. Because one of the things I was struck by was the dehumanization of George Floyd. And I said to myself, if you don't see a person as a human being, there's a logic there that says it's okay to treat people that way. And I don't agree with the logic, but I understand it. And I said, well, if I can create content to get people to see the humanity in folks, it's my way of adding to the voice of change. It's not the end all be all, but I just feel strongly that as many voices that could be a chorus for change, you can create this sort of mass, that could create the kind of change that we're looking for.
Yeah. Speaking of humanizing people, your work does just that. I saw your recent ongoing project that was really thought-provoking to not only me, but so many people in our community, Black Fatherhood, the Otherhood. Can you share a little bit more about it with me today?
Yeah. I had this goal of establishing a production company, but I didn't know where to start. I knew I wanted to show the humanity folks, but I didn't know where to start. But a friend of mine, we were sitting actually at the Idea Center. We were talking. His name is Ozzie Jones. He's an amazing director from Philadelphia and a close friend. We were sitting down and we were just talking. And we were talking about each other's backgrounds. And I was sharing with him, how I grew up, and, I didn't know my dad, and, he talked about his dad. But as we continued to talk, this idea of this myth about Black fathers, because ironically, even though I had that experience when I left high school, after high school, my stepfather left, I never felt like Black men in general were just not good fathers. That dude had challenges, but I never felt. So we were talking about it, and this idea of this myth, which is still here in 2024, about Black men don't take care of their kids. So we talked about that, and I said, there's nobody, I don't know any Black men in my circle that don't take care of their kids. So I started to do some research in the data, and the data actually shows otherwise. And I said, that's a good place for me to start. I'm going to start to tell these stories about Black men, because if I could show Black men in a loving, caring position, light, just like the people have this perception about men now, Black men now, it could start to hopefully seep and change the perception about Black men in other aspects of society. So that's what I decided to do. I was going to start with this story.
That's amazing. For everyone here with us today and those watching on the screen, I would like to show a quick 2-minute trailer of David's project, The Black Fatherhood, The Other Hood.
I realized that at an early age that's a choice. You could choose to be there, or you could choose to not be there. People can use all the excuses that they want. I didn't have a father, so that's why I'm not there. It's a cop-out. It's an excuse. Just like I said, I didn't have no idea what I was doing, but I made the choice to know that I was going to be there, regardless of whatever happened.
I guess the fact that I didn't have the father love, I guess. I mean, I don't know if I really worried about that. I just knew that I had to be there. I mean, whatever there was.
The importance of fatherhood in people's lives is key, right? And but there's a balance, at least for me, that is important to demonstrate, to show. And I don't mean gender balance. I don't necessarily mean like role balance, but like this fatherhood like balance. And I don't have the words to unpack it, but the importance to me, I think about like balance. And what are the number of things that our young people are receiving day after day after day? This is not commentary on social media. This is not commentary on music. This is just about what we are all inundated with, right? With zero balance.
The love of a father is essential. The love of a father is vulnerability. There is the word there, vulnerability. And it's a hard spot to be in, because here you got to be the king of the castle, but at the same time, you got to be understanding and yielding, and you got to be the type of person that is able to pick them up, brush their knees off, and, keep them moving in the right direction. And it's hard.
I have so many thoughts and questions, but I think it's best I give you the floor. Any follow-up points you want to share?
Yeah, and this is not to say that there aren't gaps in our society. I mean, fatherless children is an issue across the board. Men have to step up in their families. And but the idea that it's a Black problem is what I take issue with. Because again, it's that slippery slope. When you look at, if you think Black men are irresponsible guys in families, then that slips and seeps into other aspects of society. So my thing was, if I could show them as loving, caring parents, then it's not a hard ask or an unreasonable expectation to have folks look at them that way in other aspects of society. So that's the whole purpose behind this. Just to really change the perceptions, and hopefully when there's times of conflict, hopefully that perspective seeps into the mind of somebody, especially during times of conflict, and it gives it just a moment of pause. Okay, maybe this guy is a father and he's just having a bad day or whatever it is. But all I want people is just to have the information in front of them so they can judge on their own, aside from these myths that are out there. And the data shows 70% of black men are present in their kids' lives versus 60% of white fathers and even a lower percent of Hispanic fathers. Black fathers are there. So it's a myth that's just untrue. And it's unfortunately diluted and sort of distorted this perspective about black men, so.
No, thank you for sharing that. I think it's really important for people to kind of pause and confront their willful ignorance on this topic. But very important to highlight and break those stereotypes. I know you mentioned that you're a father yourself, and in your experiences as a dad, kind of what led you to this project.
It's interesting. That experience with my stepfather leaving, actually I've grown to appreciate that experience because it was a prime point in my life because I made a determination that I would never do that to my family. And when I got married, I was very intentional about I'm going to do my best. This has got to work. And, I'm fortunate because my wife has made it very easy. She's just, with all due respect to the wives out there, I've got the best one in the universe. So, yeah. And we'll be celebrating our 30th anniversary this coming June, Yes. So that was really important to me, and my daughter and I, we have an amazing relationship. We're like, it's the three of us, like the Three Musketeers, so family, and I give a lot of credit to my mom too, because she's really, her struggle is, her story is just amazing. And what she's done to keep us all together, that was a model for me to follow, a role model for me to just constantly keep in the back of my mind as I was building my own, so.
You're really just amazing. I truly feel so honored and grateful that I'm able to conduct this conversation with you and learn more about you and your work with everyone watching. Everything you do is meaningful, intentional, and creates impactful change, which is everything that TEDx stands for and everything TEDxCamden really is about. So thank you.
Sure. I do have to say that, I'm not here without and one of the deep appreciations I have for my mom is introducing me to my Buddhist practice. And I've been practicing this Buddhism for now 48 years. And, this process that we have in our practice, and to give you guys context, if you have ever seen the movie, What's Love Got to Do with It, the same chant, Nam Myoho Renge Kyo, that Tina Turner did, is the same practice that we have. But it allows you to do this human revolution, to really change and transform. And I really believe that my transformation has led me to my wife, my family. And the organization that I practice in was founded in 1930. So we're coming up on our centennial in 2030. And I have a mentor in life who passed away this past November. His name is Daisaku Ikeda. But he wrote some guidance in September of 2020 that talked about the 10 years from 2020 to 2030 are crucial, and we can enact change based on the power of the victory of our human revolution. So for me, I really chanted about that. I chanted those words, like, what did that mean to me? And I realized that, first of all, there's a concept in Buddhism, the oneness of life and its environment. You have your life, you have your environment. They're not mutually exclusive. They're two sides of the same coin. So I realized I can't have that change in society without there being a powerful change in me. And what would that change be? In order to build this film production company, I knew I had to overcome something that's dogged me a lot of my life, which is fear. Fear of whatever, fear of success, fear of failure, just fear. I feel like I've been a fearaholic for a good part of my life. So that was my human revolution, to really attack that fear. So every day that I go about this is a day, I don't know if that fear goes away, but I'm at a point now where I'm really determined not to let that fear stop me. You know what I mean? Not let it stop me, so, yeah.
Wow. Thank you for sharing that. I think practices from Eastern spirituality are indeed so powerful, and it's magical how you were able to transform your fears into what you called your own human revolution. As we kind of wrap up this conversation, I'm sure I and everyone else here is interested in learning more about what's next for you. So are you allowed to share a bit about your next project, or yes?
I am currently I'm still working on the documentary. Funding is a huge thing. I'm always looking for funding. I just submitted for a grant. Hopefully that comes through, because that'll allow me to finish this Black fatherhood piece, which I think is so important. But also there's another piece that I'm working on. It's called Winning Season. And it's right now it's running on YouTube, and it's a 5-part series. And what Winning Season is, I've always wanted to, again, just put content out there that gets people to think differently. I'm a huge person about hope and inspiration. I think we're in a society that is always looking for hope, that needs hope and needs inspiration. So I wanted to put some stuff out there. And people's stories of victory, I think, are very profound and very impactful. So I just started filming people's stories. And I remember I filmed this. I didn't have a name for the series yet. And I filmed this, a friend of mine from Philly, I filmed his story, but again, I didn't. And then I was at Idea Center, and while I was sitting there, a friend of ours came in. Her name is Melissa Morales. And she came in and she had this sweatshirt on that said Winning Season. I was like, ooh, what's that? So she sat down and she shared with me her journey and her ability to win over postpartum depression and live her winning season. And I was so moved by her story that I said to myself, that's it. That's the name of the series. So I asked her, I said, Melissa, I told her what I'm looking to do. Do you mind if I use your brand name for the series? And she's like, absolutely. And I said, that means I have to tell your story. And she was more than happy to do it. So this series, again, it's on YouTube, and it's a 5-part series. I just finished editing. Well, I'm working on the last piece now. And I'm looking for funding so I can continue it. Because I just found out we just had over 1,000 views for the series. And I'm like, oh man, I'm so excited about it. Some YouTubers out there, they're probably looking at like just 1,000. But for me and my low expectation self, I'm like, yes, But so I'm really excited about it. So I'm looking for funding to be able to continue doing this and sharing these stories, because it says to me there's 1,000 people out there that need inspiration. So I'm going to keep doing it.
Thank you so much. And that, everyone, is David Goodman.